Building Our Futures, Disability, Carcerality, and Public Health.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Building Our Futures, Disability, Carcerality, and Public Health. For the agenda today, I really wanted to keep it brief. I have my introduction, some comments on erasure, carcerality, the intersections of the two, and then we'll wrap up. My name is Trinity McFadden, and I am a Black Deaf Scholar, MPH candidate, traveler, poet, dancer, communicator, and advocate. And really drawing from my experiences, my goal today here is to provide a broad understanding of the intersection issues facing disabled community members, particularly those impacted by the carceral state. And I'm extremely grateful to have received some grounding from Health Justice Commons on the medical industrial complex and the relationship that it holds within the prison industrial complex before entering my graduate program. And that's really shaping today's presentation. As a Black deaf woman, my identity and cultural experiences really shape how I view the world and how I show up and how I'm showing up today. For example, I was born with a bilateral sensory neural hearing loss, which is a super medically clinical way of saying that I can't hear in either ear because of some other condition. And that condition has progressively declined over the past 25 years of my life, and it will continue to do so. I am the only deaf person in my family, and really, along with societal perspectives of speech therapy and conforming to the hearing world, I was raised to communicate orally with hearing aids, despite ASL being my first language. I would I'm grateful to know sign language now, fluent in it. But for today's presentation, I decided to give it orally. And I just wanted to name that being raised orally is not an uncommon experience for those in the deaf community. And again, like it was in my college years where I truly understood my identity. And in more recent years, I really aligned myself with the principles of disability justice. And I could dive into my entire life story, but I do have limited time. So the one other experience that I want to share is from 3 years ago that unknowingly led me to this conversation today. And at that time, 3 years ago in 2023, I was a fellow with Media Justice, and we focused on combating racialized disinformation. And my contribution was really underscoring how anti-disability narratives contribute to the erasure of multiply marginalized people, particularly Black disabled people, when experiencing state-sanctioned violence. And by analyzing media coverage of state-sanctioned violence against Black disabled people directly, I can now make the connection between the erasure of disability in media narratives and how that perpetuates health. Because the media ultimately shapes public perceptions and policy decisions and all these other things that impact and affect access to care and support for our communities. So now I'm going to be talking a little bit about erasure. And like I just mentioned about like media, it's no coincidence that the public and our communities erase disabled people because the media does so. And it's embedded in the very history of the colonized land of so-called United States. um, there were laws that actually criminalized disability, and it was rooted in erasure, surveillance, and disposing of our own bodies. And these were called ugly laws. In the 1800s, igniting the eugenics movement in like the 19th, early 20th century. And I just want to take a collective breath to honor our ancestors and ourselves, who continue to be impacted by these harmful regimes, ideologies, actions rooted in violence against our humanity and joy as human beings. So I'm going to take a breath, and I encourage you all to take a breath with me. Thank you. As I was preparing this presentation, um, I was guided by my spirit to really have this moment, especially since we're considering our future. We cannot move forward without honoring the past and the present. Leaning into or pivoting into the carceral system. So, Ruha Benjamin in Race After Technology points out that the carceral system, and I quote, severely limits the life chances of those labeled criminal, who by design are overwhelmingly Black. He then goes to say that criminal is code for Black folks, poor folks, immigrants, disposable people, unwanted people, things like that. Seems like erasure, right? Because it is. And Black, deaf, disabled people are most impacted by carceral violence, especially demonstrated by the fact that majority of people who are murdered by police are deaf and disabled. And that was stated by the Harriet Tubman Collective in their chapter entitled Disability Solidarity, Completing the Vision for Black Lives, in Alice Wong's books, Disability, Visibility. And this statement is further proven by the fact that each state incarcerates Black residents in state prisons at a higher rate than white residents, with the average being 6 times as much, according to the Prison Policy Initiative. And I really wanted to share this because I want us to have this context in mind when we're discussing the intersections of disability, health, and carceral systems, which we'll do right now, which I'm pivoting to. And when thinking about the intersections of these three things, disability, heart, health, when, sorry, when thinking about the intersections between disability, health, and carceral systems, I just wanted I just want it to be known that there is minimal to no healthcare in the prison system. There are barriers all around. Um, for example, there's barriers to getting and keeping health insurance while you're incarcerated because of the Medicaid exclusion policy, and that policy specifically excludes incarcerated people from getting Medicaid despite qualifying. And I want to be clear that I mention this because it's not about giving Medicaid to incarcerated people and things will be like solved, thumbs up. No, rather, like, I really bring this up because my point is about access to care, period. Just recognizing that prisons have a lot of people with diabetes, tuberculosis, mental health conditions, other chronic conditions at rates that are higher than those in the free world. I just want it to be known that incarcerated people are not receiving equitable access to support the management and alleviation of their conditions, even though technically technically, incarcerated people are supposed to get access to medical care. But again, like I said, there's a lot of barriers that we may not even consider. And some of the barriers simply mirror what we see in the free world. And also, I just want to share that those in immigrant detention center, those who are detained by ICE, there are no protections whatsoever. And there's a larger conversation to be had about that as well, but I just wanted to mention that before going into the rest of my presentation on like mostly focused on prisons and jails in the US, but I want to make it known that this extends beyond that. Um, but going back to the barriers that we see, recognizing that there are a lot of people in prison who are choosing to balance between getting what extraordinary little wages that they have, if any, because some states don't allow wages at all, between going to the doctor, getting items that they need from commissary, or even communicating with their loved ones. They can't do all three. It's way too expensive to do all three. And there's a lot of documentation from folks in blogs and news articles like the Marshall Project that that take information directly from stories and information from incarcerated people, explaining, like, for example, I remember this one blog from the Marshall Project. They shared that they would rather let their back pain get to a point where they cannot walk than go to the medical unit. I also remember like another um same piece from the Marshall Project. They shared that this person, he only earns $15 a month, and a medical appointment alone costs at least $6 with the prescription. So that's like almost half of his wages a month, and he also has to eat. He has to also communicate with his family. We don't know, right? We don't know the other needs, but that's way too high. And just the point that I'm trying to drive home is that people inside prison walls will really just suffer the outcomes of not getting their needs met to the point of making their conditions worse, then go to the doctor. And again, I just want to mention the parallels to the free world are wild because I know I have some family members who would do the same thing. I have done the same thing, right? So, but free world inside prison walls, these outcomes are systemic. It's by design. But even if going to the doctor was free, medical providers in prison do not care, especially with private contractors that the prisons may work with. And really, the carceral healthcare system, just like the United States healthcare system, is driven by profit and not genuinely caring for other people. I also want to name that there's just stigma surrounding incarcerated people like getting care while they're in prison. And also there's a fear from incarcerated people themselves not getting their medical issues addressed and not being taken seriously. I interviewed someone for grad school, and they shared with me that from the perspective of like a corrections officer or a staff member, the incarcerated person is faking it. They're just trying to get a break or avoid extra punishment like solitary confinement, but they're in pain. They need support and they're struggling to exist in this environment. And to be really honest with you, I'm not mad if someone is lying or trying to like or whatever, trying to use the system to get a break from violence. I fully support that. Like that kind of stigma is not okay. But unfortunately, it's the reality right now for incarcerated people. And I just want to take another moment to remember those who had their lives drastically cut short because of the cages that they were in. Many times, nurses in these facilities choose between keeping someone alive or being complicit in covering up the harm done by corrections officers in the prisons itself. And it's not unique. Some are publicly documented, but most aren't. Um, most stories and most stories, most incidents um, of lives being taken have taken place inside prison, jails, detention facilities, and they're all being erased. And the world views incarcerated people as other, um, and in so many aspects of society, they're often excluded, even when they're free and they paid their debt to society. But I want us to remember that those are our people in there. There are Black and brown disabled people in these cages, and the fact that they're in these environments alone are making their lives worse with absolutely no infrastructure to support them. And I wanted to make it clear that these statements are also true for those who are indigenous to Turtle Island, Palestinians, Sudanese people, those in Democratic Republic of the Congo, what have you name it. Anyone who is experiencing or has experienced a genocide, mass displacement, and disabling events because of oppressive forces. I wanted to make it clear that we need to take care of our people now and not wait any longer. So when you and I, when all of us are talking about the erasure of disability in the free world, we absolutely cannot forget about the erasure of disability within prison walls and the other forms of carceral system exists and lives. And as we fight to abolish these institutions, don't forget about Black disabled people. To close, I want to share an excerpt of Latif McLeod's poem titled I Am Too Pretty for Some Ugly Laws, and I really encourage everyone to experience the full poem on your own. I'm too pretty for some ugly laws, too smooth to be shut in, too smart and eclectic for any box you put me in. My swagger is too bold to be swept up in the public streets. You can stare at me all you want. No cop will bust in my head and carry me away to an institution. No doctor will diagnose me, an helpless invalid with an incurable disease. No angry mob with clubs and torches trying to run me out of town. Whatever you do, my roots are rigid, like a 100-year-old tree. I will stay right here to glare at your ugly face, too. I really wanted to close with this part of the poem because that's what this conference embodies. They tried to get rid of us, but we are still here, still fighting, still resisting, and still finding Black disabled joy. Thank you all so much for joining me for Building Our Futures, Disability, Carcerality, and Public Health. Um, yeah, thank you again.